All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the TFTuesday Podcast. My name is Zill. It's good to be back here again with y'all today. I am heartbroken that the Jays lost the World Series. It is the most Toronto thing possible that we were leading at the very end of the last game of Game 7 and still managed to fumble the bag. But you know what? I didn't expect them to be in the World Series anyway, so I am thankful for them on that front. And I'm also thankful for all of our wonderful patrons who help to keep this show going. And if you're interested in continuing to help support the show, you can always check us out at patreon.com/TFTuesdayPod. I know that both Libra and I really appreciate all the support that we've gotten over the past few years, and it really helps make sure that this show continues. But enough about that. I'm really excited because I have a guest here today to chat with us all about a variety of different things, especially things related to art styles and working through burnout, which is a very pertinent topic. But I'll turn the floor over to Pix to introduce themselves.
Hey, my name is Pix, pronouns they, them. You might know me as Occasional Pixel TFs, OCC Pix TFs, just kind of like... If there's a PIX and a TFS, it's probably going to be me. I'm a transformation artist who's been in the community since about 2020. And excited to be here. This is literally my first podcast.
Awesome. Yeah, no, really excited to have you and to get to chat about a bunch of really interesting topics, honestly. I know that, I was kind of keyed into your work through another guest on the show, and was really interested in what I saw, and in particular kind of the very different art styles and such that you use in some of your pieces. But before I get into that, maybe I'll take a step back. I'd love to hear a bit more about how you came to find your way into the transformation fandom.
Oh, okay. So this might be a bit odd to say, but I kind of feel like I was always going to wind up in a community like this one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
I've just always kind of been interested in that sort of stuff. Like, I remember I got my first phone at like age 10, and I think even before then I was like a really big fan of like werewolf movies growing up, and once I was 10 I was able to look up as many clips from the An American Werewolf in London as I wanted to, and kind of spiraling down a rabbit hole of that and like pirated anime clips. I used to back in first grade, I remember like waking up right as the Adult Swim Toonami block was ending off, and I got to like watch a few episodes of Inuyasha before I had to get ready for school. I was an early bird back then. But yeah, I just think like as the years went on, I just like got more and more interested into transformation as just like a thing. And as a teenager, I started doing the whole unsupervised internet access thing of like, perusing DeviantArt before it kind of became like a slop mine of AI images. But
yeah,
funny enough, I was actually like one of the few teenagers who didn't make an adult account and lie about their age. It was more like, no, I'm keeping myself SFW. I do not want to like dive too deep into the trenches of adult stuff until I'm actually an adult. And then by the time, like a few months after I turned 18, I was like, okay, time for me to make some TF art. And after that, I sort of like found my way into a few servers, met a couple of friends, and it just sort of spiraled out from there.
Yeah. That's fascinating. I think, in terms of how many people we've had on the show, I think so many of them went that route of, I am going to lie about my age a little bit and like access some of these spaces before they perhaps knew any better. So I mean, I respect your commitment to being honest on that front and being no, I'm gonna wait.
I mean, to be fair, I did kind of like peruse now and then on roleplay sites like Chat or Chatsy, but I was always like, no, I'm doing the SFW stuff. Just, you can find someone else here on the internet that's probably into that kind of stuff, but not me.
Yeah. And sorry, go ahead.
No, it's all right. But yeah, like I said, I kind of always felt like I was gonna wind up in a community I kind of feel the same way about coming out as non-binary, where I look
Hmm.
back on myself as a kid and I'm like, how did anybody think I was cis?
Yeah.
Like I now I'm not saying that every flamboyant theater obsessed kid who was really interested in Greek mythology and didn't want to be seen as I'm not saying that everybody who's like that is going to be like a trans or non-binary egg waiting to crack.
Yeah.
It's just in my case, it was glaringly obvious. I don't understand how like middle school bullies can clock the fact that you're gay before you find out.
I know. Oh my God. I think about that all the time because so much of like I feel like my own journey through my own like gender identity and like sexuality ended up being built out in part out of, oh, I'm not what they said I was, but it's like no, actually they knew somehow, and like if they had just not bothered me, it would have been so much easier for me to get from point A to point B. And I'm like resentful of the fact that A, they could clock me, and B, they put me back a few years. I'm like, come on.
Yeah, it's really annoying.
Yeah.
One more thing I do want to say about like my younger years being in TF. I remember I used to like write very like brief TF stories just for myself in like my phone notes app. And
Oh
I
yeah.
remember at one point, like I was 10 or 11 while this happened, these two anecdotes. I wound up coming across the Tetsuo mutation scene from Akira,
Oh yeah.
that scene, and I distinctly remember not being horrified, but being like, "Oh wow, that's some good animation." I wonder why I want to like replay this all the time. Just like young me replaying like Sailor Moon transformation sequences and that scene from Akira, and being like, "Yeah, this is probably just a normal thing to do." But I
Yeah.
also remember I came across this one clip of Teen Wolf, not like the original 80s film, but I think
Right.
it was like a teen drama that was made around like the the late 2000s, early 2010s.
Oh yeah,
And
the
I
MTV one.
yeah, the MTV one. And I distinctly remember this scene where like one of the main characters is going through, you know, the full moon transformation, but instead of showing it, it just cuts to everyone else's expression as you see like the silhouette changing in the background. And I remember 10-year-old me looking at that and being like, well, that's a ripoff. Like young me was like, look, if you have a show called Teen Wolf, you need to have the wolf in it. I'm not really like, I was 10. I wasn't interested in teen drama played by people in their mid-20s.
No, I honestly I feel like that is such a valid reaction, and because like how can you have a werewolf show and not show the werewolf? Like, come on, like what are we doing
Exactly.
here?
It's stupid.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, so you did mention that like you hit 18, you started making accounts, you found your way in, and you kind of like found your way into like a few spaces and such. I was curious what you felt was like the biggest obstacle that you faced when you were starting out, just like exploring the fandom as a whole, and even when you were starting to get into like creating art.
Well, okay, this is definitely something that happened when I joined the fandom first off, and
Hmm.
I'm probably gonna like mention it a few. I don't want to get like too depressing or like heavy with it, but
Yeah.
I think it took me forever to like realize that I was able to advocate for myself. Growing up, I was very much like taught like do not talk back. It is never going to work in your favor, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
And so I started off just like a really like meek and admittedly I was like a really like paranoid and high-strung person who was constantly like terrified of accidentally starting discourse because I spoke out of line, and it's taking me a while to like finally break through that kind of stuff, and it's
Yeah.
still it's still like a process that I'm working through, but I feel like I'm definitely like a lot more confident in myself than I was starting off.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like especially with like online spaces as a whole, so much of how we end up like interacting with other people is predicated on us having enough self-esteem to like present the way in which we want to then be treated to some degree. And like, that's not to justify people being shitty, but I feel like especially like goes with any space, but I think especially in like fandom like spaces, there seems to always be people who can like sniff out who they can like push around, and it takes time to like build up boundaries. And especially like, you know, coming like as many people in the space starting into like these kind of like online sites and such, from younger ages, I feel like we're kind of forced to learn really quickly how to build up those boundaries, or otherwise we'll get steamrolled.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I didn't really have a lot of friends in high school outside of like, you know, 2 or 3. So I didn't really have a lot of practice for like, you know, being in a friend group or advocating for myself. So I was just like an awkward mess the first year or so. And it took some like help, like not only just like learning how to quickly mature, but it took like some help from a lot of really close friends that I consider like, you know, family at this point, for me to like get myself in order, basically. I don't want to be rude to past me, because like, you know, past me is still me, but there's some points where I'm just like, oh my god, did I really act that way like 5 years ago?
I feel like that's just a constant like thing that people in general always do. Like, we look back on our past selves and we're like, if only I knew what I knew now. But, you know, part of how you became the way you are now is because you experienced that journey, right? So, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, I think when I was kind of like looking at a lot of like the art that you've kind of posted online, I really got the sense of like a very distinct sort of vision for the kinds of pieces you want to create. But I'd love to hear, like, in your own terms, essentially how you would say you differentiate your work from your TF peers, and like what makes your stuff uniquely yours.
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I'm definitely not like the only TF artist that does pixel art. I'm pretty sure there's like a lot of others who are pretty well versed in that. But I think, at least for me, I would say that I'm like one of the most open when it comes to trying out different mediums. To those of you who don't know about my gallery, I pretty much like most of my gallery is focused around transformations that employ some sort of art style change. Like, I've done switches from, you know, traditional drawing tablet art over to pixel art. I've done stuff that emulates like manga books or vintage anime. I've even done a few where I've like tried my best to emulate like a fake 3D style, where I'm just like meticulously adding like 10 layers of shading to make this look like it's straight out of a Wii U game. I've even done like Blender at some point, and honestly, like, if left unchecked, I could probably like, I feel like it's only a matter of time before I start doing like some scrapbooking mix of styles that you'd see out of Madoka Magica.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Sorry, tangent. Because you mentioned it, I will never get over the incredible art style in any scenes with any of the witches.
Oh my gosh, I know.
So good.
Honestly, like, I've kind of been like waffling here and there where it's like, okay, imagine if you did some art of like turning into one of the witches from Madoka. And I'm like, okay, that would be really, really fun. But also that show is incredibly depressing, and I don't really know if... You know, I'm a little bit unsure about it, if I'm gonna be real.
Oh my gosh. Sorry, go ahead.
A lot of my peers have more of a stomach for angst, but for me it's like, it kind of depends on the weather.
Yeah. Is it kind of something that, at least like from like, you know, using the depending on the weather kind of metaphor, like, is it only something that you really kind of indulge with your art on like sunny days, or like as a trope or kind of theme in general on sunnier days?
Okay, that's a really good question. I think it mostly just depends on like generally how I feel about it, because there are some shows that have like pretty heavy atmospheres, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I would love to make some art of that. Like, I'm a giant fan of like glitch shows like The Amazing Digital Circus or
Oh,
Knights
yeah.
of Guinevere, and like that I'm all up for. But I guess like Madoka's like on a level of like, dark and brooding that I'm like, I'll have to be in like a really good headspace, or I'll have to come up with a design that like really speaks with me because yeah, I don't know. Like I think it's obviously like I think it goes without saying that I'm not gonna like draw somebody getting decapitated. Like
Yeah, exactly. No, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
I feel like that's definitely a line for a lot of artists.
Well, I mean, I've got a few folks in the community that are like, oh yeah, I'm more than cool with drawing gore. And like,
Yeah.
I'm more than chill with body horror. It's just like, when Viscera gets involved in any way, I'm just, it's not my thing.
Yeah.
There is no way I can be a surgeon.
Yeah. Well, I guess then, we talked a little bit about how you kind of differentiate your work, and like kind of the focus that you take with it. Are there any like life experiences that really contributed to the way in which you've kind of approached these things outside of what you've already kind of talked about?
Well, that is honest. I'm not entirely sure how I started getting interested in wanting to experiment with a lot of styles, because I guess kind of like my experience with transformation, it just kind of seems like something that I've been interested in for such a large portion of my life that I can't really pinpoint like a key moment where it started,
Right. Yeah.
Like, I remember growing up, I was always a fan of like a bunch of, well, like classic animated movies and the stranger ones at the same time. Like, I was a giant fan of The Incredibles and Ratatouille growing up, but I also remember being a giant fan of the Beatles' Yellow Submarine or Les Triplets de Belleville. Have you ever seen that, The Triplets of Belleville?
No, actually. What is that?
Oh, it's this 2003 animated film by this guy named Sylvain Chomet, who is like an ex-Disney animator. About like a Polish grandmother whose grandson enters the Tour de France and then gets kidnapped by the French mafia because the French mafia wants to use the top cyclists as like horses to bet on, basically.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so she has to travel to this town called Belleville, which is pretty much just like if you took New York and Paris and threw them into a blender.
Yeah.
With the help of a trio of retired vaudeville singers. And if you pull up some images, like, you can really see that it's got like an exaggerated style. There isn't a single character that doesn't have like really heavy eye bags or a distinct nose.
Yeah. I'm looking at some pics here now, and I'm definitely picking up on what you're saying.
Yeah. But yeah, I've just always been a fan of like taking inspiration from various sources, and I didn't really have like a specific art style when I started doodling during my teen years, so I think it just sort of like I was just pumping out whatever shit came to mind, and then at some point I'm like, oh hey, this is really fun. And of course I definitely got some inspiration from some of the more veteran artists in the TF community. Like, there was this one Blackshirt Boy piece from 2018 of like an office meeting where one of the employees has turned into an anime girl, and like BSB like made everybody else in the office a little bit more realistically proportioned just to make that contrast all the more apparent. So like that was definitely a big inspiration for me.
Oh, yeah. I mean, BSB plays with proportions and mediums in their own way that I think is really cool, too. So I can definitely see the connection there.
Absolutely. I think it was definitely like, if I had to name anyone particularly, I definitely think like BSB and Red Flare 500 were like, oh yeah, those are like the faces I can name when it comes to art style changes that inspired me. But there's probably like at least a good 5 artists whose names like escape my tongue right now, and like once I'm done recording, I'll stumble across them and be like, oh my gosh, why didn't I mention them? It was so freaking obvious.
I mean, part of the beauty of the community is that there's so many incredible people making art within it, right? So like, I feel like, sometimes it's difficult to remember every single person that, has had an impact on how we make art.
Yeah, exactly. And that doesn't mean I don't care about them. It's just like, hey, I'm sorry, my memory is kind of shit.
Yeah, I feel you there. I guess one thing that also really stands out about your art, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about this, but a lot of your work is, multi-paneled, or you'll have like sequences as part of the final kind of like artwork pieces. And I was curious if there was something in particular that draws you towards making sequences over single frame images, because it's not like you haven't made both, but I definitely detected, at least from your gallery, like a much more emphasis on like sequences and such.
Yeah. I'm gonna be real, I just really like sequences. Don't get me wrong, there is something really fun about just having like a single pinup that gets the point across, but I guess I'm always a fan of like beginning to end progression, and it just scratches something in the back of my brain. Yeah. And also, this might be really silly to say, but like, I get paid more for sequences. So like it's extra work, but I'm getting a bit more of a payout, and it, gets the happy chemicals rolling in my brain. So I thought, hey, why not do this? I am, oh my gosh, I've wanted to do comics for like the longest time, but like I've been currently I'm just trying to like get quicker at my art and loosen up my perfectionism. I'll talk a little bit about that more later, but I remember back in like 2021, I wanted to try a TF comic, and I wanted to get it done by Valentine's Day because it was a specific theme. But I remember, like, it was 2 days before Valentine's Day. I was barely finished with the first page, and then I forgot to save and lost like 4 hours worth of progress, at which point I was like, I threw up my hands and I was like, okay, fuck this is going in the storage.
Oh, that is like an artist's worst nightmare.
Yeah. Oh, another thing about my art process that I do want to say. I only started using a drawing tablet last Christmas.
Wow.
Yeah, starting off, I used this site called Piskel.com, which was an online pixel art app, and I eventually moved over to Sprite after that, which is this, downloadable pixel art program that I think a lot of professionals use. But yeah, back when I was like getting started with Krita, which is my main software that I use, and Piskel, I just used my laptop's trackpad like a maniac.
Oh, okay. I have to mention this. I too used a trackpad on my laptop for an extremely long amount of time when I was starting out with art. And I look back on that now with like a mixture of awe and horror in terms of like, wow, I was able to achieve that much. And oh my God, my life was like 5 times more difficult. Why was I doing this to myself? Do you look back on that in the same way?
Yeah, I look back on that. And whenever I brought it up to any of my friends in the art community, there was always that reaction of, you're shitting me, right? There's no way. What the hell, Pix? Like, I'm impressed, but also I'm worried for you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
My best friend Z has said this a few times, but she said something along the lines of like, look, you've basically spent like the first few years of your time in this community with like the Dragon Ball Z training weights, and I'm expecting one of these days you're just gonna like take them off, they're gonna form a crater in the ground, and you're just gonna be zooming past all of us.
I love it.
Yeah. And I was about to say, like, don't you mean the training weights from Naruto? And it's like, they're kind of from the same thing. And I said, okay, I've only seen like a few episodes from either of those shows, so I wouldn't know.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, that is honestly hats off to you for having made so much of your art through a trackpad. That is honestly incredible, and I am in awe. So
thank you.
Good job there.
Oh, jeez.
Obviously, we talked a little bit about how, sequences scratch a specific itch in your brain. Also, it helps from like a commission standpoint, which honestly mood. When you are looking at like doing personal pieces though, do you have any sort of process for coming up with like ideas, like having like a rough list that you kind of like hope to work through, or do you kind of just dive into whatever you're vibing with at a given moment?
Honestly, that's a bit of an interesting question because there was this one period where I was so laser focused in making commissions for other people that when somebody asked like, "Hey, do you have any ideas on the mind?" I'm like, can you give me like 5 minutes? Because I spent so much time like focusing on other people that I didn't really like give that much airspace for my own ideas. And that's not like ragging on other people. That was just like me being so focused in work that I kind of forgot to like relax a little bit with it. I think that's like, I feel like aside from growing my self-esteem, that's been another learning experience where I've just been like, okay, I know you get money for this, but you also get joy out of this, so don't try to treat this like it's entirely a job, you know?
Yeah. I feel like that's such a tough kind of trap that a lot of people fall into at the start, and it's really difficult to kind of heal our relationship after you like get into a bit of a rut from that perspective.
Oh yeah, I get that.
Yeah. Were there any like specific things that you did to kind of like work to unlearn that initial process, or was it more like you were encouraged or like were self-encouraging to just get yourself out of that?
I think it definitely took some encouragement from other folks, and honestly a little bit of role play helped, as silly as it is to admit. But yeah, it's just something that I broke out of with time, and I'm currently like writing down a little list of like ideas that are like ideas that I could see myself. Okay, I'm not sure how to say this because like part of me wants to say like, oh, these are some ideas that I could see myself doing best. And I'm like, okay, that sounds a little bit like vain of you to say, Pex.
Yeah.
Because, like, I definitely have a bunch of artist friends who are, like, really, really good at things like art style emulation or really interesting panel work. Like, my friend Zaydon, on For Affinity, Blue Sky, she's great. She's done a lot of, like, art style emulation as well, and I think, like, she indirectly helped me get a little bit more bold with some of my choices. But I feel like there are some ideas where it's like, honestly, I could only see this choice coming out of your head, Pix. A lot of it is just like really, really obscure choices or just like really specific niches. You've probably seen it over in my gallery, but one of the more notable self-indulgent pieces I did was that late 2000s style, early internet Catgirl raver TF.
Oh, yes.
Which I wasn't expecting that to be so popular that I got like a bunch of my other friends to make raver OCs, and I wound up like doing a sequel pick as a commission. But like, that was an idea that was like, it very much came from like the specific amount of internet brain rot I was stepped in around 2009. Yeah. Like, I was a giant fan of Flipnote Hatena animations, Newgrounds animations, Newground Flash games. I didn't have MapleStory, but I definitely watched a lot of videos on MapleStory. And I just decided to say, you know what? I didn't get the chance to be all scene core and cringe back when I was like a kid. So, yeah, I'm making up for lost time. Let's pump up the Nightcore and see what I can make.
I love it. I will say, like, that was a big part of my own, like, I don't want to date myself too much, but like my teenage years in particular, in like the late aughts and such, and you know, seeing that piece with like the internet speak of the day and age just like ethered me a little bit. I love it. It ethered me a little bit though. I was like, oh my god, yeah, I feel so old right now.
Yeah, there's this one comment where it's just like, oh my god, the unregistered Hypercam 2 cameo is making me feel old. And I'm like, well, yeah, I had to like, you know, I had to give proper tribute to all of the classics, the Mario Flash animations, the over-designed Raver designs, the Newgrounds RPG, Maple Story Classic. Oh yeah, I know what you mean. Wait, what do you mean Maple Story Classic? Yeah, apparently it got renamed to Maple Story Classic. I don't know either.
I love it. I love it. I guess then, thinking towards the things that you've kind of worked within, and I know we're going to get into kind of emulating art styles, but one thing I wanted to ask first was also your work within like creating TF GIFs, because that's such like a, to me at least, and maybe I have a misunderstanding, but like to me that seems to be such a complex thing to do. And so I guess I was curious what like your process is to kind of plan those out and get them to completion.
Ooh, that's honestly a really good question. When I first started off, I got like really, really into just trying to do pixel art animations, but as my art style got a bit more complex, I was more like, okay, I'm gonna need like a lot more time in order to do one of these, so I don't know, it kind of fell by the wayside, but I'm trying my best to get back into it. Actually, one of my current commissions right now is like semi-animated, so I think what I usually wind up doing is I try to like map out the base frames at least and think, okay, what do I want this to look like and how can I do it in such a way where I'm not going to immediately get burnt out?
Right. Yeah, I feel like that's probably the biggest challenge, just because of the volume of work that has to go into creating it. Because, like, I mean, I have no idea how many frames you might have to put in, but, like, it's not just 1 or 2 or 3, right? Like, you have to plan out a lot.
There are some simpler ones I've done. I was planning on, like, doing a few pieces in the future where I'm just having, like, the text to wave up and down, and I'm like, okay, I could do that in, like, 8 frames of animation or something like that. But I'm imagining if you're referring to like really elaborate TF GIFs, you're probably asking. There was this one I did starting off that was a birthday gift from my best friend where I was turning her Sona into a Lammy from Gemma Lammy, that PS1 rhythm game.
Oh, yeah.
I think that took me like 300 frames in total.
Oh my god.
And like I somehow managed to crank that out in like 3 months time working on and off. You can probably tell from like the size of my gallery, but a lot of my art takes like a long time to work on. And that's not because I'm like sitting on my hands. It's like, well, in the past I used to be super perfectionistic, but I was also dealing with like part-time jobs and college on top of that.
Right.
And only recently have I been like, okay, I'm taking a break from college. I just have to worry about the part-time job to focus on rent and this. I've got a little bit more free time.
Yeah.
But
well,
yeah,
go ahead.
I think just generally for like my semi-animated pics, it's like I just try to like I get the idea in my head first. I need to have like a solid idea on how I want this to look like in my head. I can't improv it. At which point I'm like, okay, we're going to block this out and we're going to see how we can do this without setting ourselves on fire from overwork.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, man. Well, I guess then, like one of the key things that I think really defines your work is emulating art styles, as we kind of touched on before earlier. And in particular, I find it really stands out when you're doing a transformation of someone into a character or a creature that's from a setting that has like a really defined style. And so I'd like to understand a bit more about what drew you towards that sort of approach in the first place. I know we talked about it like a little bit earlier, but like specifically in terms of constantly adapting to different art styles, that's a very unique approach that I don't see very often.
Well, I think part of it is, as I said, I had a lot of I was exposed to a lot of different mediums and art styles growing up, and I think that just got me like really interested into that. Couple that with like the BSB and Red Flare pics that got that idea into my head. But the more I think about it, I think I do it like I think I often do it to show like a really deep admiration for the art style, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I imagine there are some people, I don't know how many, but I imagine there are some people that would look at art style change and see that as like, well, you're just like ripping off somebody's style, and, you know, they find a bit more admiration in taking something from a different piece of media and making that in your own style to see like, hey, this is my spin on things. But
Right.
the way I do it is mostly like, look, if I'm going through the effort to like turn someone into Lopunny but styled after the Pokemon Adventures manga, and I'm going through like every little detail of making sure, okay, does this line thickness match the style? Does this like grainy texture match the printing style? Are the Japanese translations accurate? I'm not using Google Translate for this. It's out of like, I want to show that, like, I care enough about the art style not to half-ass it.
Right.
If I may go on a little bit of a side tangent.
Please.
Yeah, during high school, when I started off pixel art, it was in high school, and I'm not gonna say, like, what my username was there, because I'm not gonna, like, dox myself, and to anyone who might recognize my voice, hi, don't squeal on me, please. Snitches get stitches and all that, but
Yes.
yeah, I started off in a lot of fan game communities for like Mario and Mega Man fan games and things of that sort. And one of the things that I was taught very early on is if you want it to feel like the original game, you gotta at least like nail some of the art style down. I'm sure you've probably seen this here or there, but have you ever been inside a game store and you've seen like some merchandise of like, oh, we've got the Avengers in the Mega Man style, but you can really tell that they just took like the base Mega Man sprite and they slapped the outfits on top of it haphazardly?
Oh my god, yes. I know exactly what you're talking about.
That is one of the biggest pet peeves in the pixel art community, I can tell you that.
Oh, I can believe it.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but I think like growing up, well, I guess like I wouldn't say growing up, with my experience in the pixel art community, you start to learn a lot of like the little quirks that make that style work. Like for a lot of NES games, you've probably heard this, but for the few of you that haven't, most NES games had like a limited amount of color palettes where like you only had 32 colors to work with. And most of the sprites could only really handle 4 colors at the same time. And translucent counted as one of those colors.
Yes.
So, if we're using Mega Man, for instance, we would have, like, the base body that's like, okay, black, blue, dark blue, and clear. And then on a different layer, you would have the face, which is black, white, sort of skin tone, and translucent. And you would sort of like layer them on top of each other in order to give the illusion of more colors.
Right.
And I think like having that information sort of drilled into me, saying it's drilled into me sounds so rude, but like it was pretty like those lessons were deeply embedded in me, and it kind of transitioned into my appreciation for other art styles. And I feel like really nailing that style shows like, hey, I'm not GameStop rolling out some cheap like pixel art Avengers art. Like I show that I care about this.
Yeah, no, you know what? I think framing it like that and like from like your past experiences and like what you were exposed to, that makes complete sense to me. And I find that to really like interesting and thoughtful kind of explanation from the perspective of like showing respect for the mediums themselves, and in particular not coming across like you're essentially being like almost, I don't want to say like a culture vulture, that's not really the right thing, but like almost like a tourist, you know, like it's like, no, I actually understand the source material and I understand where it's coming from, and I want to make something that's authentic to that media that I am kind of creating a piece in, but also is like weaving into its own kind of like fandom fabric.
Yeah, exactly. This might be a weird way to compare it, but like you've probably seen episodes of The Simpsons where like they generally reference like Japanese culture or like weird Japanese infomercials and anime at conventions.
Yes.
And it's always like just general enough that you can tell like, okay, so you're just like a random guy from California or the Midwest who only has like the most surface level experience of Japanese culture, and if we're gonna be real, it's kind of racist.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, it basically is, yes.
Yeah, and then like compare that to, I'd say, a more recent show like Steven Universe, where it's like you can tell the specific inspiration that is worn on their sleeves to the point where you can like point out certain scenes and see like, okay, I'm guessing Rebecca Sugar was watching Revolutionary Girl Lieutenant when they were storyboarding this. On the topic of anime, I did something a little bit similar from one of my pieces that I'm still really fond of is this one of a guy turning into a Ojo-sama from a fictional 90s anime. And obviously, I made sure to have like the classic VHS distortion and the yellow subtitles to make it look like, you know, this was ripped off of somebody's television and uploaded onto the internet forums. But on top of that, I think I just sort of like took a bunch of I took a bunch of inspiration from some period accurate shows and just sort of like mixed it together like a smorgasbord. Like the background takes inspiration from Revolutionary Girl Lieutenant, and the design itself is like a stylistic mishmash of like Ranma 1/2 and Sailor Moon and maybe a little bit of Ghibli, but mostly it's just Sailor Moon and Ranma.
Yeah. No, I definitely see the Sailor Moon influence in particular. And yeah, it's okay. It's funny. So I didn't have necessarily a background, so I wasn't 100% sure if it was a reference to a real anime. I was convinced. So clearly you did your job properly.
You would be surprised how like occasionally I get that comment. Like for the manga Lopani piece that I did, I remember back when I was on DeviantArt, I had a few comments along the lines of, look, you could tell me that the last few panels were like direct screenshots from the manga, and I would have believed you.
Yeah.
Again, this is partially why like a lot of my art takes such a long time, but right. I do it because like I care about it, and it's really fun to see that sort of like extreme contrast. Like recently, I did a piece of someone turning into an anthro version of Amaterasu from Okami. And I was so, like, excited for that piece that I wound up, like, experimenting with new brushes in my art software because I wanted to give it that calligraphy brush sumie style to it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be real. I'm kind of insane with this shit.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love how you did the art style with that one, and in particular, like there's so many little details from like the line thickness to even the way in which the brushwork is done. And also, of course, I mean, I love a mid-TF snout and a mid-TF feet paw. So, like, I mean,
yeah,
this is very much my alley.
Yeah, I think my favorite detail with that is, like, the more transformed parts of the body have gradually thicker and thicker line art, while the face still has, like, the thinner line art. Also, if you're curious, in the bottom right corner, I've got a friend who's really good at translating stuff to more traditional form of Japanese, so I like hit her up and I'm like, hey, I kind of want to make like my signature into one of those old-fashioned stamps that you see in a lot of ukiyo-e art. Would you mind helping me with translation? I'm kind of like crummy at my own Japanese.
I love it.
I'm good at French, I'm good at German, I'm like okay with Italian and Latin, but just still haven't like figured my way around like Japanese, Chinese, or Cyrillic.
Yeah. No, and I mean, honestly, like with Japanese in particular, I mean, there's so many kanji characters. It's quite the challenge, especially as like a non-native speaker, to really pick it up.
And I still want to like have an attempt to show that like, hey, I'm doing my due diligence. I'm not like The Simpsons where they used like an online translator from the 90s to do all this junk.
Oh man, no, I think it's good that you have
I've
that
got a
commitment
bit
to
of
the
a
authenticity.
I've got a bit of a bone to pick with The Simpsons. If I may go on another side tangent, I know like I have a
Sure.
feeling that like a lot of this has been like, okay, Pix is saying a topic, and then they're going off into the sunset for a few minutes and then going back on topic. But
We love tangents here, so you're all good.
well, thank you. For the longest time, I had like this comedically petty dislike towards Milhouse from The Simpsons because the very first episode I saw that had Milhouse in it was this episode where Bart sold his soul to Milhouse. Basically, like, Bart gets in trouble for a prank he pulls at church. Milhouse squeals on the both of them because he doesn't want his soul to burn in hell forever. And Bart's like, dude, a soul is just, a bunch of fairy tale nonsense that they make to make us scared. And Milhouse is like, well, okay, if you're not that interested in having a soul, I could always, like, buy it off of you. And then, like, Bart sells his soul to Milhouse. He starts seeing, like, a bunch of supernatural stuff happens. And when he goes back to Milhouse to be like, dude, I don't see my reflection anymore and my dog hates me. Can I get my soul back? Milhouse starts acting all high and mighty. And he winds up selling it for Alf Pogs. So that was, like, my first reaction towards Milhouse. I'm like, okay, this is a kid who will act meek, but will sell your soul for Pogs in the 90s. I'm not even sure if Pogs were still a thing in the 90s.
I think they were. I think they were still going in the 90s, as far as I recall.
Was it kind of like on its way out, and like people were a little bit more interested in like Pokemon cards by then?
Yeah, I if I recall correctly, the episode you're talking about is from 95. I think Pogs were starting to like fade out around 97, so like that would make sense.
Yeah, in my head I always see them as like a late 80s early 90s kind of thing. I think like if I'm more passionate about something, the more I'm able to like expertly clock like what decade or time period it's from. But when it's something like Pogs, I'm like, I don't know, like 86 or something like that.
Oh man.
But
sorry,
tangent
back
over.
to your point. Yeah.
Yeah, that was it for my tangent. I just wanted to talk about an episode of The Simpsons.
No, entirely fair. I will say I did enjoy the ending of that episode. I thought it was nice that Lisa got Bart's soul back. So
yeah, no, it was a sweet ending, but just most of what I remember was just like, wow, Milhouse, you're kind of a dick.
In that episode especially, yes.
Yeah. But anyways, moving on from that.
Yeah, moving on. I guess, one of the things I appreciate, and again, you've kind of talked about this already, but one thing I liked about how you do the emulation art style, be it from like mangas, 3D animations, pixel art, animes, you are really kind of pulling in these other mediums and such, and kind of in some of them even like fully replicating them, like with some of the 3D work. And so I guess I was curious to know, you've talked about how you've dabbled in things as far ranging as like pixel art and then Blender and such. When you've had to like kind of create art pieces or have wanted to create art pieces that involve that sort of medium switching, how have you kind of like managed the overarching complexity of having like, perhaps something starting in one medium and then finishing in another?
I think a lot of it comes down to how detailed the rough sketches are. Like, when I want to do an especially complex art style shift, it really depends on me, like, getting a good idea on what the sketch lines are like, because that's usually when I figure out what I want the body proportions to look like, how I want the face to look like. So I start off with like, okay, here's the basic, here's step one in my style, and then I'm gonna immediately work on the last step just to figure that out, and then I'll like sort of narrow my way into the middle. And for some pieces, there have been a few times where There's this one piece where I managed to like flat out rip a low poly model off of some Gary's Mod forums for it. It was the
Oh my god.
you know that do you know that indie game Pseudo-Regalia, the Metroidvania with the goats-ish anthro with the really thick thighs?
Oh, yes. Now I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
yes.
that one, yes. Sybil from Pseudo-Regalia. I did a TF of her, and I thought, like, okay, well, I feel like just trying to make something low poly using Krita might be a little bit insane, so I'm gonna see if I can find a way to, like, directly rip the model from the game, and then I'll, you know, put it up in Blender and, like, recreate the retro lighting as best as I can. And that was easy. The hard part was actually getting the model to work in Blender, because apparently Gary's mod files are, like, really finicky, and they're like, nope, I only want to be, like, opened up on Source Filmmaker. I don't touch Blender. So I had to, like, scour the internet in order to find, like, a plugin that could get the file extension to work on it.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, like, thankfully, I don't have to worry. I mean, thankfully, now I have the plugin, so I don't have to worry about that anymore. But there was, like, a tiny, tiny part of me that was, like, honestly, I feel like I should have, like, asked for an extra $10 based on what a headache that was.
Yeah, I mean...
It's not like the client's fault, it's not the client's fault. If I want to blame anyone, it's Gabe Newell for his spaghetti code.
I think that's a very fair target to blame, honestly. His spaghetti code has caused a lot of issues over the years.
Yeah, I'm not the first person to complain about, you know, spaghetti code. I'm sure, like, the Team Fortress 2 fandom is, like, wailing in agony trying to make their mods.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh gosh, my hat goes off to them because the challenges they must face. I can only imagine.
You are stronger people than I am.
Well, then I guess, you know, to the point of, you know, emulations that you've really enjoyed making, are there any that, like, stand out in your mind as ones that, like, you particularly love even looking back? And are there any that you would avoid doing in the future, either because it's a complex or sort of challenge to replicate, or because you've kind of, like, lost interest in it moving forwards?
That's a good question. I'm still a really big fan of, like, switching from traditional art to pixel art. I don't know, something about that scratches the itch in my brain that is never not going to be scratched by it. And recently I've been really fond of, like, having, like, more, you know, more vintage transformations, whether it's, like, you know, that 1960s retro futurist opening to Bewitched style, or the retro anime from the 90s that I talked about.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any styles from the past that I wouldn't be interested in. Maybe I'm, like, answering this question a little bit early, but if there's any styles that I'm just not really that interested in doing, it's usually from, like, media that I'm not a fan of, or it's either from media that I'm not a fan of, or stuff like, if someone went to me and be like, hi, I want you to turn my Sona into, like, a realistic celebrity, I'd be like, okay, you're asking a lot of me if you want me to do, like, realistic, like, oil painting kind of stuff on my laptop. And second, I'm not making art of, like, real people, TF. That's a bit weird for me.
Yeah, no, 100%. You know, it's funny you mention that, because a lot of the art that I've done in the past, or, like, continue to do, is in the realm of photo manipulation, and a lot of the art that used to get posted on places like DeviantArt and such in that medium were very focused on, like, manipulating pictures of celebrities and such, and that always struck me as really weird, because I was like, I guess, like, these are public domain pictures, but, like, I don't really A, see the appeal, and B, it feels a little icky to me. And, like, look, I'm not here to yuck anyone's yum, but, like,
well, yeah, I know,
you know, that's not really, they didn't put their pictures out there for that, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Like, starting off, I was a little bit of a Puritan, where I was like, oh, I don't want to make anything that, like, that might be seen a bit as weird. And then, like, through the years, I'm like, I'm in like a weird furry kink sub community. Like, who the fuck cares if I want to turn into like a horny chess piece? It's like, I'm not even like, I'm asexual, but even still, I'm like, you know what? That would be fun to do just for the vibes.
Yeah.
But I think like for me, when it comes to like, I've definitely seen some animations or like draw over pieces of like someone taking their IRL self and turning them into something animated, which I'm always fond of the Roger Rabbiting, but I feel like the difference with that is like, these are people who are willingly and consensually going, hey, I'm putting part of my body out on the internet so I can, you know, turn them into Jessica Rabbit or whatever. Mm-hmm. And like, I had a conversation with a few friends about it with VTubers, and one of my friends is like, look, I'm only gonna like turn myself into the VTubers who are like aware of the weird art people post of their Sona and are like, you know what, you do you, be freaks for all I care.
Yeah.
And like, not everybody's gonna be a fan of that, but like, there are some who are like, no, cool, I give you free reign for that, and in that case, be that VTuber for all I want.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that it's really cool that, you know, there are definitely a good chunk of like streamers and VTubers and such who are very aware of this kind of stuff and are like, go wild. I think that's a pretty cool thing to do. So
I think it definitely boils down to consent. Like, there are definitely some pieces that I've gotten from clients where the clients are like, hey, would you maybe like post this with a little bit of a heads up to be like, hey, don't be weird about this in the comments, please. And like, obviously, like, that's not going to change anybody's minds, and there are still some jerks who are going to be weird no matter what, but like, it's just a courtesy call to say like, hey, you can be weird and horny about the person in this photo, or hey, the person who commissioned this doesn't really like, they're not really comfortable with that kind of stuff, okay?
Yeah. No, 100%. I have a tangent question, but because you mentioned it, I have to ask, what's the horniest chess piece?
Okay, that's a really good question. I think it just kind of depends on the situation. Okay. Just a little quick preface. Recently I've been seeing myself as like gray sexual, or I think like there's this one subset of asexual I read up called agosexual.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar.
Agosexual, where it's like you're not interested in doing anything lewd and nasty IRL, but you're more than cool with doing it in fiction.
Yes.
So with that said, I think it would entirely depend on what sort of situation you're going for. Like, you could obviously take a pawn or a king and be like, okay, you're the sub in the relationship. We can easily make you like a humanized femboy, or just turn you into a pawn with like a bowl just slapped onto it.
Yes.
Queens are obviously like, you know, queens. You could even... They've got like fairly curvy chess pieces as is, and like people love turning into royalty.
Oh, absolutely.
If you're a fan of animals, the knight is right there.
Yep.
Like, I'm pretty sure you can make an argument about any kind of horny chess piece, but if you want my opinion, I'd have to go for the queen and the knight.
Nice. First of all, excellent choice. If I may offer a counterpoint, I would argue that the horniest chess piece is the rook, not because it has like a specific role that it like fulfills, but as someone who enjoys a lot of like inanimate TF, the idea of being, you know, quote unquote hard all the time, I think that makes it the horniest.
Okay, I was gonna say like, rook's a really good third option, but for me it's more like, it's such an unnatural shape that it's fun to see that kind of trend. I mean, I've like flat out thought about like turning into washing machines in the past, or like some of the bizarre shaped of Pokemon, like, hey, look at Sigilif, and it's like, yeah, what about Sigilif? It's like a weird flying cactus thing decorated in Aztec patterns. I know, isn't it wonderful?
I love it. Honestly, the world of TF is always so broad and wide, and I just love novelty more than anything. So I'm with you there, honestly. Like, those all sound like excellent things to transform into.
I guess, like, sometimes I wonder if, like, I wind up annoying some of my friends, because sometimes my friends are just interested in, like, hey, I'm just in the mood for, like, a vanilla, like, you know, French-made TF or something like that, and I'm like, oh, I mean, that's really cool. It's just not really what I've been, like, thinking about as of recent. It's like, what have you been thinking of? Has it been, like, obscure point-and-click adventure characters again, Pix? It's like, well, yeah. And, like, a Commodore 64 and, like, the 70... Do you want, like, a general overview, or do you have time for me to, like, write down an entire list?
Yeah.
Ever since I've, like, started getting ideas back for myself, they've kind of just been, like... They've been, like, flooding as of recent.
Yes. Oh, my gosh. Well, I do want to get on to the last topic, but there was one last question I wanted to ask here, and it was particularly around just what art styles you're willing to, or I guess if there's any limits to the types of art styles you'd be willing to emulate from a technical perspective. Like, are there any sort of, like, I guess, things that you've considered that are like, you know what, that is actually, like, that would be so complex to do, and it would be such a reach that I think I'm just going to leave that where it is? Or is there really no limit?
I think the really realistic stuff is probably where I put, like, the kibosh on things. Like, I feel like, you know, like, once you get past the PlayStation 3 era and you get to, like, a lot of, like, really detailed games with, like, really grizzled and realistic faces, I'm saying, like, if I ever wind up, like, turning someone into someone from the cast of Half-Life, it's going to be slightly stylized, because there is no way in hell I'm going to be able to recreate every single pore on Alex Vance's face.
Exactly.
And I think, like, again, the limits mostly depend on, like, what shows I am and am not comfortable with. Like, this might be a little bit interesting for you to hear, but one of the few styles that I'm, like, kind of like, it's not officially on a no list, but like a soft no list. I don't do Disney TFs.
Oh, that is interesting.
It is not, it doesn't have anything to do with the films themselves, but just because the company puts that much, like, ick in my mouth, that it's like, my friends have made the counter argument that, like, hey, but by making niche weird furry art, you're kind of, like, doing a little bit of protest against Disney that's, like, ultra puritanical. And I'm like, yeah, but I could also be giving them, like, extra eyes on their products, and I don't know, it's like a gamble. It's a gamble that I don't really want to, like, try.
Yeah.
But I'm, like, more than comfortable with, like, working around it. Like, I've considered doing, like, Don Bluth TFs in the past, or, like, recently I got a couple of friends in another server really interested in rubber hose cartoons from the 1920s. And, like, I use old Disney and Fleischer cartoons as reference, but they're wholly unique characters.
Right, exactly.
Or circling back to what I said at the beginning of beginning of today's episode, I'm a giant fan of Knights of Guinevere. I'm more than comfortable. I find it funny. It's like, yes, I would rather turn into the haggard cryptid of a broken down capitalist animatronic girl than, like, become, I don't know, Belle from Beauty and the Beast. Like, no offense to you, Belle. It's just, you know, your company sucks eggs.
Oh my gosh. I was about to say, well, this explains why you like Knights of Guinevere TF so much.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You beat me to it.
Yeah. I'm a Defunct Land fan if it wasn't obvious enough.
Yeah. No, I totally see that. Oh man. Well then I guess, you know, we've talked a lot about your art specifically. There's something that's kind of like been surrounding a lot of the discussion, and that's kind of around burnout, because I know you've talked a little bit before about how it can take you quite a bit of time to work through individual pieces, especially because of all the different mediums that you're often integrating into some of these final products. And I feel like burnout is something that comes with the territory of creating art in general, and we can't always be super inspired, but it feels like you probably have a very specific connection to that. And so I was curious to hear a bit more what your experiences have been like dealing with it.
Well, I'm gonna be real. There have been a lot of... I don't really have burnout in like, oh, I have like a really heavy burnout period for like a few days and then I take a break and I get better. It's more like I'm like in a state of mild burnout for like months, but I can't really afford to take a break, whether it's for rent or whether it's because I want to finish commissions quicker. So right. I just sort of like... It's sort of this tightrope balance where I'm like usually pretty worn out and tired, but I'm still trying to like give it one extra go without my body collapsing from the marathon race.
Mm-hmm.
I think like part of it is just because... I spend so much time trying to, like, break through a lot of my perfectionism. I've had, like, interventions with some of my friends where this is a direct quote. Well, not an exact direct quote, but something that has happened in a conversation where someone said, like, Pex, you don't have to zoom into your canvas at 500% just to fix some stray pixels. You don't need to do that.
Right.
Nobody's gonna notice this, and if they do, they're insane and weird.
Yes, correct.
I think, like, I must admit, growing up, I kind of had this weird sort of double standard imposed onto me, where it always felt like everybody else was allowed to slip up and be kind of imperfect, except me. Like, I was in the kind of family where, like, if you had a 79 for a test grade, you would get a family intervention.
Right.
And I wasn't the kid who went to art school. I was the kid who started off going to a traditional high school and then transitioned into college, where I finally decided, hey, I want to give, like, an art major a try. So I always felt like, on a subconscious level at least, that I always had to prove myself with double the effort to show, like, hey, I'm an actual artist. This isn't something that I'm doing, like... I'm not an amateur. I feel like...
Right.
I feel like that's an issue in a lot of, like, art communities or colleges with art majors, is that there's always this feeling of, like, comparing yourself to other people. Like, you're the film student with, like, a shoestring budget and, like, a rented camera and a dream, and you're comparing yourself to, like, some of your classmates who have a lot more friends, and those friends have sound equipment, and they have a car that they can, like, that they can drive to all of the sets, and, your brain starts talking, and you start thinking to yourself, wow, I'm poor and kind of a fraud.
Yeah. That feeling is so difficult to grapple with. And I feel like, especially like, maybe this is just my own kind of impression, but I felt like there's definitely a lot of folks in even like this community who feel like, oh, I feel like I need to prove that I'm a real artist, and that's the only way that I'll like find that sort of satisfaction with my own work, because I see other people who have had a lot of success, and I maybe don't know them personally, but from the outside, it looks like, oh, they're achieving everything they're trying to do. They're a real artist, but I have these doubts almost about myself, and that is holding me back in X, Y, or Z fashion.
Yeah, I definitely think one of the internal monologues that I've been trying my best to, like, rewrite or shut up is one of the things that I've compared myself to others for the longest time is the number of pieces that I do. And like, yeah. I know that that's like an inherently unfair thing to do, because there are people who are like, they'll just post any sketch or full piece that they do, and they work at a faster pace than I do because they're not so focused on like honing the line art to a perfect degree. but my brain still looks at that and go like, okay, look, you've been in this community for how long? And you've only made like this little amount of pieces? Are you serious? Obviously, my internal monologue is a lot more harsh than that, but this isn't a therapy session, so I'm not going to get into that.
Yeah.
And I think I don't know, I feel like a lot of the time in this community has been like me trying to come into my own shoes and like, I guess, mature a little bit and to realize that like, hey, you don't have to be like perfect for people to like your art. You don't have to, like, I understand you put a lot of passion into it, but you don't have to like kill yourself over it.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's definitely something that I'm still like, I still need to remind myself of it now and then, but I feel like I'm hoping that at least it's easier for me to do compared to how it was like 3 years ago.
Yeah, I think like, especially with things like burnout and perfectionism, progress is never linear. I think that if you look over the time period, like you mentioned, like, 3 years ago versus now, I'm sure there has been progress, but we're also, especially people who grapple with like perfectionism, we're our own worst critics. Like, you will always kind of see your work in a light that pretty much no one else will. And it sounds especially like, from what you described of like, like growing up and such, like that was instilled in kind of an early age. So it has a pretty like knock-on effect on then how you view things like, creating art itself and finding that sort of satisfaction from getting it exactly how you want it to look in your head.
Yeah, I think there's still a tiny part of my brain that's like, no, you don't understand. We need to get a good grade in transformation art. That's a normal thing to want.
It's such a normal thing to want.
And okay, funny enough, on the topic of like perfectionism and trying to break through things, there have been little things that I've been doing in order to like, I guess, trick my brain. One thing, I've been using like a slightly grainier pen brush rather than like the overly clean one I used when I was first starting out on Krita. And it's small, but it's a little way to like trick my brain into going like, okay, that line looks good, moving on.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of wanting to get like a perfect curve all of the time. And I've also been like, I spend so much time doing like full, really invested pieces, but recently I've been like, you know what, this afternoon I'm just gonna like try to doodle something really quick. I'm gonna try to like make something in the space of a day. And I've also been like, I'm not joking when I say this, but I've honestly and thoroughly considered like doing Homestuck and Yaneko Sugar Girls TFs because I look at that art and I'm like, you know what? Okay, I mean, for Yaneko Sugar Girls, that's like a shitpost, and I mean that in an affectionate way.
Yeah.
But for Homestuck, I'm like, okay, this art is fast and loose, and sometimes a weird mixture of live-action stock photos and like the artist's work. But it still looks good. And if that art looks good, being this loose, then like, I could afford to loosen up my line art a little bit. Let's be reasonable here.
I gotta ask, is the rising potential interest in Homestuck TF at all influenced by the pilot that got released in September?
I came up with the idea like a week before the pilot announcement.
Oh my gosh.
I got so annoyed that I'm like, no, you understand? I came up with this like 9 days ago before I even realized that Toby Fox was voicing John Egbert again. I'm not just riding the wave of popularity, guys.
Yeah. Oh my god. No, that's so funny to me.
I do find that a bit, oh my gosh, I do find it a bit funny that like, whenever I wind up making a piece that's like based off a more recent piece of media, by the time I'm finished with it, it's already been out for like a few months, so it feels like I'm late to the party.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I feel like that constantly with so many different pieces of media and such. Ugh.
Yeah. I'm recently working on a piece themed around an Enna Dream Barbecue Chapter 1, which I'm really excited for.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of like, I'm excited for it, and I know that I probably shouldn't rush it, but at the same time, it does feel like I'm showing up to the party being like, hey guys, sorry about that, I accidentally got lost on like a country road and my tire blew up and I had to like escape from a slasher movie villain, but I'm ready to party, and it's like, Pix, the party was 3 months ago.
Oh my goodness.
Am I on time for the next party then? Like in a week, I guess. It's like, okay, cool, I'm going to that party then.
I love it.
Thank you.
I guess then, like, when it's come to like we've talked about like art block and like burnout and perfectionism as like overarching kind of like elements with working with art. Have there ever been any like specific like burnout roadblocks that you've run into like midway through creating an art piece? And I'm curious if you had any like specific ways you navigated out of it that you found helpful moving forwards.
Well, I think with my art, I feel like any artist can like feel this sort of can feel what I'm about to say, but there's always that bit of like, you go into art block and you look at your work in progress and you're like, oh my god, the line art on that part is absolute shit. I could have done that so much better. And there's that gnawing feeling that be like, come on, you can redo it. You can redo it. It's not going to take that long. Just do it, jackass. But yeah, I think for me, like, my biggest roadblock is, like, those moments mid-progress where you're starting to doubt how this is looking out and you just want to, like, restart from a certain point.
Yeah.
And this might be absolutely silly for me to say, but it took a lot of, like, mental fortitude for me to, like, take a break day and just, like, spend the day, like, hanging out at a cafe or playing a game on my computer or RPing with folks. Because I'm usually in such, like, a diligent, work-heavy mood that it takes a lot of energy for me to go, like, you know what, I'm just gonna play Balatro for the rest of the evening.
Yeah, I feel like... in particular, you know, that internal pressure of like, oh, I have to be productive is so hard to like work out of. And like, I'll give yourself the grace to be like, no, I actually need a break. And that is going to be a healthy thing for me to do so that I can continue to create instead of like, oh, no, I have to focus on my productivity right in the here and now.
Yeah. And I think it ties back into the topic about comparing yourself to other artists, because I often compare myself to like, okay, this person works like a 30-hour work shift, and they can also make like such fast progress with their art. Why can't I be like that?
Yeah.
And like, the logical answer is like, well, to be fair, Pix, you are like dealing with some burnout, and you do have your own job, and that person works at like a much faster speed than you do. And like, the rational part of my brain is like, okay, well, yeah, that does make sense. But a larger part of my brain is like, okay, that's just an excuse. You need to work more. Just like pushing logical. I think like part of my brain is just like, yes, that is a logical explanation. But I also want to be mad at myself. Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I think in particular when it comes to like comparisons and such, when we get like into really negative headspaces, I feel like that's in particular when I, as an artist, will start comparing myself to other people, and it's always in an unfavorable light because it's like, oh, I'm trying to like penalize myself for not doing what like other people I admire are doing.
Yeah, it's such a shitty trap that you get like stuck in from time to time, and it's hard to just remind yourself, why do I want a good grade in transformation art? That doesn't make sense.
Yep.
That's not a thing.
And yet our brains tell us it is.
Yeah, it's just it's something that you gotta work on constantly. And like, I feel like I'm getting better, but I still got a long way to go at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. It's tough. Yeah. would you say that when it comes to like the artist comparison piece, have there ever been any moments where you've actually found it to be helpful, or is like the idea of like comparing ourselves to other artists almost always kind of a zero-sum game in your mind?
I mean, I've definitely taken inspiration from other artists.
Right.
Like, okay, I'm going to use that shading method for this piece. Oh, hold on, excuse me for a second.
Yeah, sure.
Ugh, sorry about that. Yeah, I've used other artists for, like, inspiration in the past, but I think there's a difference in, like, taking inspiration and admiring certain bits of art versus comparing yourself to others.
Yeah, exactly.
Because in the case of, like, you know, taking inspiration, it's more like, hey, we're on the same level, we're, like, sharing different ideas with each other, we're a team. But with comparison, it's competitive. At least that's my opinion of it. It's obviously, like, you could probably tell, like, you can probably ask, like, 5 different artists the same question, and they're like, no, I do enjoy comparing myself to other people, because it gives me that push to do a little bit better. But, like, I'm not the kind of person where, like, tough love works on me.
Yeah.
I tried it in the past, and it just makes me sad, I'm gonna be real.
Yeah, no, and I think it's so much about like unlearning perfectionism and working through burnout is learning to be kind to ourselves. And I feel like so much of like the kind of culture, I'll call this like cultural norm of like, oh yeah, you know, you just need tough love. It's like, no, actually that's pretty proven to not be a good thing in many cases. And especially when it comes to something that frankly is an expression of an interest that is somewhat vulnerable to express in the first place. Like you got to give yourself a little bit of grace, and it's so hard to like give ourselves the almost permission to do that, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I'm kind of loosely reminded of like those conservative dads who are always like, well, my parents hit me as a child and I turned out fine, and they really didn't turn out fine.
They did not.
they never turn out fine. I don't know why they keep telling themselves that.
I feel like it's easier to tell themselves that instead of to admit that, oh, maybe I was like physically abused as a child. But I mean, that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, what's the meme of like guys will something instead of going to therapy?
Yes, it is exactly that. Oh, jeez. Well, then I guess one other thing I wanted to ask about the burnout conversation was just if there have been any other techniques you found that help stave it off, like prevent it to some degree outside of like, you know, like building in breaks, you know, like engaging in media that is creatively refreshing instead of draining, that sort of thing. Like, are there any other techniques that you found really work for you?
Honestly, for me at least, it helps to talk to other people.
Yeah.
I feel like I have a habit of like getting stuck in my head so easily that like it's just refreshing to like, you know, to either talk in DMs or to hop onto a voice call with someone. I've been doing that a lot more recently because it just helps to like hear the sound of other people's voices. But I don't know, it just helps to have somebody else with you to like get yourself out of your head.
Yeah.
Because I think the best way to describe my problem with like both perfectionism and burnout is like I'll have such a habit of like digging myself deeper and deeper into my head to the point where like I need a lot of help to like yank myself out of there.
Mm-hmm.
It's a progress. It's a process, like I said. I keep on wanting to say process and progress at the same time. And my tongue is tripping over itself sometimes.
There's like a Freudian slip in there somewhere of like, you know, finding a process is progress. But anyways, that sometimes our mouths don't work the way we want them to.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Well, I did have some audience questions that I wanted to make sure that I saved time for.
Sure, hit me.
Yeah, awesome. The first question I have comes from Max Velocity. And Max says, many people talk about TF as escapism, but given that nearly any TF would make life drastically more difficult than your current life, is that really the opposite of escapism? Is that hard mode?
Okay, well, first off, Max, thanks for the question. Honestly... Oh, wait, hold on a second. Oh, shoot, I think I accidentally, How did that start? Give me a quick second.
Yeah, all good.
Okay, sorry about that. Just a tab just started playing out of nowhere for some reason. I didn't even touch my spacebar. I don't know what happened.
Oh, we love finicky computers.
It is what this is still my darling, but they can be so weird sometimes. But yeah, I think honestly, I wouldn't think about it that way. Well, I wouldn't, because the way I see it is if you're transforming into something else, then automatically the world you operate in is a lot more fantastical than the reality we're currently stuck in. If people can, if there is a chance for people to turn into a cartoon rabbit, for instance.
Yeah.
Then it's safe to assume that you're not the first person that this has happened to, and there are ways to work around this.
Interesting.
And I've seen a lot of people who are really fans, who are genuinely really big fans of the challenge, because I guess it's a little bit of adrenaline inducing to them. There are some people who would be yes, I do want to go on dangerous fantasy missions, and if I happen to be a high elf with size double G boobs, that's just an added cherry on top. Look, I'm being honest here. I've been in tabletop sessions, and it's just look, I'm coming up with some really, really deep and thoughtful character arcs, and also I'm making them absolutely stacked just because that gives me gender euphoria.
Exactly. Hey, you know what? I, as a consummate D&D player and DM, I fully support that, because if we're not playing D&D to at least some degree make ourselves super happy and affirmed, while also giving the traumas to our OCs, then what are we doing? Yeah,
exactly. I've heard of some people who have been yeah, I wanted to really delve into the dark pits of my soul and make a really tragic character, and I'm were you having fun with that character? And they're no, but I kind of couldn't stop it. I'm well, why did you do that then? I feel okay, no, I've seen this once or twice where there's somebody in a tabletop session who, in wanting to really delve into some realistic angst, I feel there's a line you can thread where you can indulge in that angst without delving into the level of depression that you see in a TIFF international film starring Philip Seymour Hoffman. I saw a review of Synecdoche, New York a few weeks ago, and great movie, but it's one of those movies where you look at it and you're I don't want to watch that when I'm depressed.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that, honestly.
But, yeah, going back to the question, I have seen some folks who enjoy the difficulty of, whether it's just turning into something weird or whether your whole reality changes and you get isekai'd into a new world, that can be exciting for some other people. One of my friends shared this really clever idea she had, because she's a giant Hollow Knight Silksong fan. And she had the idea of okay, what if I wound up in Silksong, but it was in Steel Soul mode, so every time I died, I would have to start off at the beginning of the game. And with every routine, with every cycle of trying to beat the game, I get more and more comfortable in it, and I start looking a little bit more like Hornet, until by the time I actually manage to beat Steel Soul mode, I am just fully in the zone as Hornet. And I don't know if that's masochistic to say, but these are fantasy magic scenarios. if I'm turning into a cat, like, is rent really the biggest thing to worry about? No, I'm either gonna, like, relish being a cat, or I'm gonna try to find, like, some cool trans femme witch to turn me back into. Or to, like, have me as a familiar for a few months until we get the spells sorted out.
Yeah. No, I gotta echo that, and I think that, especially like in terms of the phrasing of like, is it hard mode? Honestly, the definition of escapism is like at its core escaping the current situation it's in. I don't think that there's like necessarily always a connotation of it's going to be easier or harder. It's just always going to be different. And I think that, like, for example, the almost like roguelike sort of like approach with like Hollow Knight in like Steel mode, I feel like that is an example of escapism to a degree where you are fully immersing. Let me say that again. You are fully immersing yourself into a situation for good or for bad, in which you are fully encapsulating the world around you and your new form, etc. And I don't think there's anything more pure in terms of escapism than that. So even if, your life as a whole might get harder, so to speak, I don't see why that wouldn't qualify as escapism of the purest sense. So
yeah, there are some people who delve themselves into more difficult scenarios for escapism all the time, like those office workers who have like a midlife crisis at 46 and go like, you know what, I'm climbing Everest.
Yeah. And there's a good chunk of people who do stuff like that, which, you know what? Hey, I mean, if that's what your passion is in that moment, then I guess go for it, right?
Yeah, so, go ahead and climb Everest. Hope you don't die.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we have another question, and it comes from Other Side. And so Other Side wanted to know, what are your main motivations for posting your art online in places like Fur Affinity and Blue Sky?
Oh, well, hey, Other Sky. Thanks for the question. Well, I used to post on DeviantArt and the Bird site. Mm-hmm. I added on to Fur Affinity roughly around like 2022, 2023, I want to say. Mm-hmm. I obviously left the Bird app for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
I don't even think we need to like delve. Everybody knows.
Everyone knows. We all know.
Yeah, like, I jumped that ship soon as the iceberg hit. But for DeviantArt, it's a little bit more complicated because it was the first site I was on, and I was like, I'm definitely the kind of person who already has, like, a lot of plugins on my browsers that, like, get rid of any AI in the image searches or blocks ads on YouTube and, like, bypasses paywalls on webs. I'm very much the kind of person who is like curated my internet experience, so I don't even have to see most of like the weird corporate shit on the internet.
Right.
But it was getting to a point where even if I was like blocking a lot of accounts on DeviantArt that were just AI slop and working my way around that, it was still like a big enough presence that it was starting to get, like, really annoying. Mm-hmm. And I shared this sentiment with, like, a few of my other friends in the community where we're like, honestly, we're kind of, like, on and off about the opinion on whether or not we should just ditch DeviantArt altogether. And, like, obviously, like, a couple of other folks are just like, Pix, you hate AI. I'm surprised you're putting up with DeviantArt for as long as you can. And, like, my logic was always like, well, yeah, YouTube also has a lot of AI slop, but you don't, like, hold it against people whose livelihoods revolve around that.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think with sites like Fur Affinity and Blue Sky, it sort of shows, like, hey, you don't have... And this also extends to, like, sites like Mastodon or Co-Host or Itaku, where you don't have to settle for this. There are other options out there, and I think, like, me and two other of my friends simultaneously decided, yeah, you know what, we had a good run with DeviantArt, but I think we're gonna jump ship.
Yeah.
And I think, like, I mostly post on Fur Affinity and Blue Sky because I think those are places where I feel most seen in the community. Obviously, with Fur Affinity, like, of course, folks are going to be responsive to my style-accurate Amaterasu Anthro TF, but Blue Sky has also been, like, cultivating a lot of really trans-positive spaces and
Oh, yeah.
weird kink-positive spaces, at least in the corners of Blue Sky that I've been. And I can imagine that, like, that wasn't what the people who made Blue Sky were hoping for, where it's like, I mean, we were kind of, like, hoping we'd get, like, a bunch of, like, cool techie folks, but we just got, like, a bunch of weird gay people. I mean, like, a user base is still a user base, but, like, this wasn't what we were expecting.
Yeah.
I didn't say that first. That came from, like, a friend of mine on Blue Sky, and I'm, like, loosely paraphrasing what she's saying, but, like, the sentiment is shared.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I will say, I do appreciate that, especially with Blue Sky, I would say, one, definitely seconding that I think they didn't anticipate quite the user base they were going to get. I think they did have some success in getting, like, some of the techie people on and all that stuff, but, like, when I see, one of the things I love about that website in particular is just how you can really be the architect and cultivator of what you end up seeing on there in a way that I think a lot of other websites kind of fail at. And like, it's been really nice to see Fur Affinity in particular start to get better around, like, the tagging system and, like, having, like, blacklists for terms and such. But like, Blue Sky far and away seems to be, like, the spot from that perspective. And regardless of, some of my thoughts on the leadership of that website, I think that, people have really made some good spaces on there. And frankly, having been on the internet as long as I have, I am so tired of moving from one site to the other. So I feel very at home on FA and Blue Sky. I'd like them both to stick around for a while. I at least have faith that FA is going to be around for quite a bit.
Oh yeah.
And, like, they've had a good track record in terms of keeping the lights on, at least. Hopefully Blue Sky can do the same, because I'd really like to stick with that and not have to jump to another quasi Twitter-esque clone that's slightly better. I'd just like this one to improve.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that was all the questions I had. I don't know if you had any questions for me.
Well, I don't really have, like, a question. Well, I might have a question, but before I do, I just want to say, like, one last thing regarding the whole, like, I touched on it, like, here and there, but, like, my general, like, distaste for AI slop.
Yes.
In spite of, like, how much I hate that, excuse me, I'm not actually scared of it per se. Because, like, spending a lot of time on the internet, I know a fad when I see one.
Yeah.
Like, do you remember, like, when everybody tried to make Google Glass a thing, or the Ouya?
Oh yes, I will just say, for Google Glass in particular, I was in university when that was becoming a thing, or trying to become a thing, and I remember one of the professors in the faculty that I went to took his, like, faculty picture wearing them, and he just looked like such a fucking dork. It was hilarious.
Oh my gosh, that is awful. Or, like, oh my god, remember when, like, everybody wouldn't shut up about NFTs, like, 3 years ago?
Yes.
And now nobody talks about them anymore.
Yep.
They, like, completely fell out of fashion ever since, like, that weird CGI coin guy, or, like, all of the ape guys at that one convention, like, fucked up their eyes because they were staring at harsh LEDs.
Yes.
I just see, like, AI is that, another fad. The only difference is that, like, a bunch of tech companies are desperately going like, no, it can be a thing. We'll just shovel more money into it and it'll start printing money eventually. It sucks that we gotta, like, deal with it in the meantime, but, like, it's not gonna be a thing forever, you know?
Yeah. I feel like, especially with how omnipresent it feels right now, it's hard to envision it going away, but I do feel like the wall is coming. Like everyone talks about like the AI bubble, and it's so true. Like especially with like a lot of how like these companies are just like passing around the same $10 to each other right now. Like it's not it's not gonna last.
And the data is feeding its own, and the data is getting fed by its own data, and it's just getting like really incestuous, I'm gonna say.
Oh no, absolutely.
It's like when you like take a copy of a copy at the printer, and after like 10 bits of that, it's like all smudgy and barely legible, and you think it got like 2 other pages like faintly in the background as ghosts. We're at that point, and like after enough points, it's gonna be a printer jam.
Yeah, pretty much. And like it won't last. And I think especially just like I had a lot of feelings about it when it was starting to take off, in particular because as someone who does photo manipulations, like a lot of like AI slop that was being generated was like focused on like quote unquote realistic transformation images. And so it felt for a good period of time like, oh my God, my stuff is just going to like disappear because who's going to even want to care about it? Yeah. But like, I think in particular, one of the things I learned throughout all of this was like, I make my art because it is art I am making. It's not because, oh, you know, I like, yes, I want to see certain things, but like it is so different when you get to create it yourself. And I think that refocusing myself on the creation element really helped me get through a lot of those really dark early days. And now I'm just like, honestly, it looks like shit anyways, the other stuff, the AI slop. So I'm fine. Like, you know,
yeah,
I like, make my good stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think that's mostly just like, actually, I think that ties into a question that I wanted to ask you, where it's like, it took a while for me to find like my default art style. Like, I spend so much time like working on other art styles that it surprisingly took a while for me to like figure out an art style that's like, you know what, I only like figured out how I want my text boxes to look like a week ago.
Yeah.
Like, I spent like years trying to figure out like, maybe that text box doesn't look all that good. Maybe I'll switch up the font. And I only just now figured it out.
Right.
But I think like what I want to ask you is, do you have any like tips on figuring out how to find your own art style or how to like it without like comparing it to other people? Or is that something that like you're still working on too?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I mean, first of all, I will say definitely like it's always a work in progress. I feel like my art style now is different from my art style even like 2 years ago. And that's definitely like a good thing. I think when it came to finding my own art style, a lot of what I started out doing was in a sense trying to pull in other artists' art styles that I really admired and almost like putting them in a blender and then being like, okay, that's my art style. Like it is this specific amalgamation of like 20% this artist and like 30% that artist. And like that was fine starting out, but I feel like long term it's not sustainable. And so one of the things I really tried to focus on doing with my art as I like continued to work through things was continually challenging myself to work on like new ideas in different like poses and like with different sort of like overall like compositions and such, and just seeing how much I could push myself while like originally trying to like have that sort of like blender mix of art styles, but pushing myself to see, okay, if I'm pushing myself in this way, I'm going to have to do things that I've never done before. And sure, I can maybe like think about how like X artist would have tried to approach it, but like I'm in this moment, I just have to go for it. And so I think like challenging myself to do new novel things that I hadn't necessarily seen before really helped to get me out of like that initial sort of like state and start to define my art style a lot more. And I think that like in particular, because of the, I guess, like decrease in popularity of photo manipulation as like an overall art style, a lot of my original sort of approach, which is still very much part of it, but a lot of my original approach around like almost like demi type transformations, like a lot of the techniques I would use in Photoshop then also had to have other additions added onto them. Like a lot of my fur now is painted, and like that wasn't something I ever envisioned doing when I was just starting out, let alone like even a few years ago. And like the amount of like digital art skills I've just picked up organically because I've been pushing myself, I think has really helped to define my art style in a way that now has it like pretty much separate from a lot of the people I was like kind of taking from in the like original early days when I was doing it. So I guess like my overall tip is kind of like, or at least what I found worked for me, was starting off with a sense of who my direct inspirations were, and then pushing myself to do complex ideas that would force me to learn new techniques and would therefore shape my art style in kind of its own organic and original way.
I think that makes sense. Thanks. Funny enough, that's actually kind of similar to the current path I'm on, where I'm just trying to like, it's part of like the little like practice sketches I've been doing, where some days I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to draw like a different face shape than what I usually do. I'm going to try some muscle growth or a different body shape or head shape, while still keeping it like in my style.
Yeah.
And I think like if there's one thing I've learned from like, this is going to be like a really silly, this is going to be a really silly note to end on, but one thing that I've noticed like between the different styles that I've taken inspiration from, or just generally honing my art, I really, really love drawing people with eye bags.
Oh.
Okay, but like I've had like creases under my eyes since like the 5th grade. And I don't know what, it's a small detail, but I think it adds so much more like flavor to somebody's face. And also I just happen to know a lot of really, really sleep deprived, trans and non-binary people. So like, it's honest.
I feel like that's just like part of the territory, honestly. Like genuinely, do we ever get good sleep? I don't know.
Yeah, it's just like, it's part of the sleep. It's like, okay, the stockings or the leggings, the chokers, you probably have a fringe at one point.
Yeah.
And there was a period of time where you just got like 6 hours of sleep for just like a few months. And you tried to convince yourself that like you could operate on 6 hours of sleep, but you really couldn't.
Yep. No, 100%.
Yeah. But yeah, you got anything else for me?
No, I guess, well, first of all, like, thank you so much for making the time to come on. I really enjoyed getting to chat with you about all these, like, interesting topics, and in particular, just getting to chat more about your art process and how you approach stuff. If people are looking for your stuff online, where can they find you?
Oh, well, you can find me on Fur Affinity and Blue Sky. Those are my main bits under the username OCCPIXTFS. And then you add, like, the rest of the, you know, it's a .bsky social if you're on Blue Sky, and if it's on Fur Affinity, you just write in OCCPIXTFS.
Yeah.
It used to be occasional pixel TFs, but it's been shortened down to OCPixTFs. I've seen a lot of people on streams call me Ock, which is kind of funny. It's just like, it's kind of like, you know, when some people accidentally refer to someone by their last name.
Yeah, exactly.
But I also opened up a Patreon a few months ago. It's like pretty small at the moment. You can see like full quality versions of my art and like little additional sketches that I make here and there. But yeah, it's under the same username, OCPixTF. TFs plural. But yeah, I think that's all I got. But thank you so much for having me on tonight.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for coming on. And, you know, I hope people check out your stuff because I think it's really awesome. And I hope that everyone enjoyed listening to this week's episode. I think we had a really fun time recording it, and I hope that y'all had as much fun listening to it as we did having our chat today. But, in the meantime, I hope that everyone stays hydrated, gets more than 6 hours of sleep. Always good to aim for like 7.5 or 8, and keep an open mind and stay TFy, and we'll see you back here again next week.
Have a good one.